That night, when my daughter stood crying at my doorstep, her face marked with a fresh slap and her eyes filled with shattered dreams, my heart stopped for a moment. It was the very day I had feared all along. And now my fear had come true. She whispered, "Mom, you were right." But what happened after that didn't just change my life, it changed theirs forever. Hi, my name is Margaret, and I'm 55 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, in a small but warm house filled with old memories and quiet peace. My days are simple. I spend my mornings tending to my garden, my afternoons reading, and my evenings talking to my daughter Lily, who has always been the light of my life. After my husband passed away several years ago, she became my reason to keep going. We weren't rich, but we had enough love, enough peace, and enough trust to make every day feel safe. Lily was 28, independent, and full of dreams. She worked as a graphic designer for a small firm downtown. Every night she'd come home and tell me about her projects, bright colors, creative campaigns, big dreams for her future. I was proud of her. I often told her, "Sweetheart, no matter how far you go, never let anyone dim your light." She'd laugh and say, "Mom, you always worry too much." Maybe I did. Maybe that's what mothers do when they've lost too much once before. Life had its quiet rhythm, morning coffee on the porch, laughter echoing through our little kitchen, soft music in the background. But sometimes, peace hides the sound of approaching storms. I remember that evening clearly. Lily came home glowing, excitement in her eyes, the kind of joy that makes you curious and afraid at the same time. She said, "Mom, I met someone today." And that was the moment my heart skipped, because I'd seen that look before. The one that says love has entered, and with it, danger might not be far behind. His name was Ethan. That's how it began, with a name and a smile. Lily met him at a client's event downtown, and from the way she described him, I could already tell he had left quite an impression. "He's confident, kind, and so understanding, Mom," she told me, her voice carrying that dreamy tone young women often have when they believe they've found someone special. I smiled politely but felt a strange chill crawl up my spine. Confidence and kindness can be masks, and I'd lived long enough to know that some smiles hide sharp intentions. A few days later, she brought him home for dinner. Ethan was well-dressed, charming, and polite. The kind of man who knows exactly what to say to win approval. He brought flowers for Lily and a box of chocolates for me, calling me Mrs. Margaret, with a rehearsed warmth that almost felt too perfect. I tried to be kind, but every instinct in me whispered that something wasn't right. He talked about real estate deals, big clients, future investments, but when I asked about his family or background, he brushed the questions aside with vague answers. "Oh, my parents live out of state," he said, changing the subject quickly. His eyes shifted when he spoke about money, as if he calculated every word. After dinner, when Lily went to wash the dishes, Ethan leaned back, his smile still fixed, and told me how lucky I was to have such a talented daughter. His tone felt rehearsed, as though each word had been measured. I nodded, but deep down I felt uneasy. When they left for a walk, I sat by the window and watched them. He walked a step ahead of her. She followed, laughing, trying to match his pace. Something about that simple moment made my heart heavy. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a regular presence in our lives. Flowers, dinners, weekend outings. Everything looked perfect on the surface. But perfection has its own noise, the sound of silence before something breaks. I began noticing small changes in Lily. She was more secretive about her phone, more defensive when I asked questions. "Mom, please don't start," she'd say, rolling her eyes. "Not everyone is like the people you see on the news." One evening, I gathered the courage to tell her what I felt. "Sweetheart, there's something about him I don't trust," I said gently. "He talks too much about money and never about love." Lily frowned, her face hardening. "You don't even know him," she snapped. "You never like anyone I choose. Maybe you just don't want to see me happy." Her words cut deeper than she realized. I wanted to protect her, not control her, but she couldn't see that. That night, as she stormed off to her room, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the clock ticking softly on the wall. Mothers have a strange gift. We sense storms long before they reach the shore. And I knew deep down that the storm had already begun. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Lily spent more time outside than at home, always finding excuses to meet Ethan. I tried to stay patient, hoping she'd see the cracks herself, but love can be blinding, especially when it comes dressed in promises. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, she walked in with a nervous excitement on her face. "Mom," she said softly, "Ethan proposed." My hands froze mid-air. I looked at her, searching her eyes for hesitation, but all I saw was certainty. "Sweetheart, you barely know him," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Marriage isn't a fairy tale. It's a lifetime of trust, and I don't feel he's the man who can give you that." She sighed, rolling her eyes in frustration. "Mom, please. You're judging him because you don't like anyone I choose. Ethan loves me. He treats me better than anyone ever has." I wanted to shout, to tell her love without understanding is just illusion, but my voice came out weak. "Lily, you're walking into something dangerous." She snapped back, "No, I'm walking into my future. I'm tired of being told what to do." That night, she packed her bags. I begged her to think, to wait a little longer, but she was determined. As she left the house, she turned once and said, "Maybe when you see me happy, you'll realize how wrong you were." Then the door shut, and for the first time in years, the house felt empty. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the cold cup of tea I had poured for her. My heart ached, but I didn't chase her. I knew she wouldn't listen. Weeks passed. I didn't hear much from her except short texts. "We're fine, everything's great, don't worry." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that maybe I had misjudged Ethan. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face the day she left. Angry, stubborn, and already too far gone. A mother's intuition is a strange thing. It doesn't fade with distance, it grows louder in silence. Deep down, I knew something dark waited for her, and all I could do was pray that when the time came, she'd find her way back before it was too late. Months passed before I saw Lily again. When she finally visited, she looked radiant, at least from a distance. She wore a new dress, a diamond ring glistened on her finger, and she spoke with that rehearsed cheer that people use to cover discomfort. "Mom, everything's wonderful," she said, her smile too perfect to be real. She told me they had a small courthouse wedding, just the two of them. I congratulated her, even though my heart sank. She was married to a man I didn't trust, and there was nothing I could do but watch from afar. In the beginning, Ethan seemed to play the perfect husband. He sent me flowers on my birthday, called me Mom, and told Lily how lucky he was to have her. On the surface, everything appeared flawless. But perfection doesn't last long. It fades like paint in the rain. Soon, the first cracks began to show. Lily stopped visiting as often. Her calls became shorter. When I asked how she was, her voice always sounded a little too bright. Then one evening, she mentioned that Ethan's parents had moved in with them, just for a while. I felt a chill in my chest. "That's nice," I said slowly, "but doesn't that make the house a bit crowded?" She laughed it off. "Oh, they're lovely, Mom. They just need a place to stay until they figure things out." But I could hear something uneasy in her laughter. Later, she confessed that Deborah, her mother-in-law, had a habit of managing everything in the house. She would rearrange the kitchen, criticize how Lily cooked, and even decide what groceries to buy. Ethan didn't stop her. In fact, he encouraged it. Then came the money talk. One afternoon, Lily called me sounding nervous. "Mom, Deborah says I should help with the family expenses. They want me to give them $10,000 a month. It's for the household bills." My heart clenched. 10,000? Lily, that's not help, that's control. Don't agree to this. But she sighed and said softly, "I just want to keep peace. Maybe it'll make things easier." For a few months, she did it, sending them money, cutting down her own spending, pretending everything was fine. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice every time she called. The girl who once spoke about dreams now sounded like she was trying to convince herself she was happy. I told her again and again, "Sweetheart, love shouldn't cost you your peace." But she always replied with the same line, "Mom, I'm fine. Please don't worry." I knew better. Mothers always do. Happiness built on fear and control doesn't last. It crumbles quietly until one day, the truth can't be hidden anymore. It was around 6 months later when the tone of Lily's calls began to change. Her voice trembled more often now, and her laughter had become rare. I remember one particular evening. She called me late, whispering as if she didn't want anyone to hear. "Mom," she said, "they're asking for more money." My stomach tightened. "How much this time?" I asked. There was a pause before she said, 20,000. I almost dropped the phone. "Sweetheart, that's extortion. You can't give them that." Lily tried to defend them, but her words cracked midway. They said Ethan's father had hospital bills and, "Mom, I don't know what to do." I told her firmly, "You say no. Enough is enough." She went quiet. Then I heard a faint knock, followed by a voice in the background, Deborah's sharp tone, accusing her of gossiping. The call ended abruptly. The next few days, I didn't hear from her at all. I barely slept, pacing the house like a ghost, praying she was safe. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was Lily again, but this time she was crying. Her words came out broken. "Mom, Ethan said I can't work anymore." I froze. "He what?" "He says I should stay home to take care of his parents. He said it's disrespectful for a wife to put her job before her family." My blood boiled, but I tried to stay calm for her. "Sweetheart, that's not family, that's control. You have every right to work." She sobbed quietly. I told him that, and her voice faded. "He what?" I asked, my hands shaking. Then she whispered the words that every mother dreads to hear. "He hit me, Mom." The world stopped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My heart felt like it was being crushed. "He did what?" I said again, even though I'd already heard her clearly. "He slapped me," she cried. "Because I said no." She told me how Deborah had stood there, smirking, and told Ethan, if she can't obey, she doesn't belong here. And Ethan, her husband, the man she had once called her love, raised his hand and struck her across the face. That night, she packed her bag quietly while everyone slept. Her cheek burned, her pride shattered, and her hope completely gone. She took one last look at that house, the house she thought would be her future, and left without a sound. Outside, the sky had opened up, rain pouring down as if the heavens themselves wept for her. She walked for miles until she found a cab, clutching her coat tight around her trembling body. She didn't know where else to go, only that one place would always take her in, home. It was close to midnight when I heard the knocking, hard, desperate, uneven. The kind of sound that makes your heart pound before your feet even move. I hurried to the door, calling out, "Who is it?" And then I heard her voice, broken, trembling, the voice of my child. "Mom, it's me." When I opened the door, the sight before me froze my breath. Lily stood there soaked in rain, her clothes clinging to her hair a tangled mess, and her eyes red and swollen from crying. But what made my knees go weak was the red mark across her cheek, a cruel reminder of everything I had feared. She tried to speak but couldn't. Instead, she collapsed into my arms and began to sob uncontrollably. I held her tightly, feeling her body shake as if every tear carried the weight of regret. "Mom," she cried, "you were right. You were right about everything. I didn't listen. I thought he loved me. I thought I was building a life. But I was just helping them destroy mine." Her voice cracked between words, her apology falling apart with her tears. I whispered back, holding her face gently, "Sure, sweetheart. Don't say another word. You're safe now. You're home." She cried harder at that, clutching my sweater like a child again. We stood there in the doorway, the rain pouring behind her, the light from the living room washing over her bruised face, a picture I will never forget. I took her inside, wrapped her in a blanket, and made her sit near the heater. I brought her a warm cup of tea, but her hands shook too much to hold it. She just stared into the cup, silent tears rolling down her face. I sat beside her, brushing the hair from her forehead. "He can't hurt you anymore," I said softly. "You don't ever have to go back there." That night, she told me everything, the manipulation, the demands for money, the way Ethan's mother treated her like a servant, and finally, the slap that ended everything. As I listened, my anger burned like a storm inside me. I had warned her out of love, not control, but now she understood what I meant. When she finally fell asleep on the couch, I covered her with a blanket and sat beside her for hours, just watching her breathe. Every mother fears losing her child, to distance, to pride, to pain. That night, I realized I had almost lost mine to all three. But now she was back, and I promised myself I would never let anyone break her again. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside, for the first time in months, my home felt alive again. The next morning, the sunlight broke through the rain clouds, casting a pale glow into the living room where Lily still slept. I sat quietly beside her, watching the rise and fall of her breath. Her cheek had begun to swell, and the mark of his hand was still there, a cruel symbol of everything she had endured. That image hardened something inside me. I wasn't just a mother anymore, I was a witness to my daughter's pain. And I knew what I had to do. When Lily woke up, her eyes were tired but steadier. She whispered, "Mom, I don't want to hide anymore. I want to make them pay for what they did." I nodded, holding her hand. "Then we will, sweetheart. We'll do it the right way, through justice." That very afternoon, we went to the police station. The officer on duty, a kind woman, listened carefully as Lily recounted everything. The months of financial abuse, the control, the threats, and finally the violence. When Lily showed them the mark on her face and the bank statements from her joint account, the officer's expression changed from sympathy to determination. A case was filed immediately. Next, I contacted an attorney I trusted, Rebecca Moore, a strong, fearless woman who had helped women like Lily before. Rebecca met us that evening, reviewed the evidence, and said firmly, "We have everything we need. They won't walk away from this." Within 48 hours, Ethan and his mother, Deborah, were both served with restraining orders. I'll never forget the shock on Ethan's face when the officers arrived at his workplace. His charm vanished, replaced by the pale look of a man finally cornered by the truth. Weeks later, the court hearings began. The courtroom felt cold, sterile, but the truth burned brighter than any lie. Rebecca stood strong, presenting text messages, transaction records, and voice messages. Every piece of proof of their greed and cruelty. Lily sat beside me, trembling, but she didn't look away once. When she took the stand, her voice cracked only once, when she said, "He told me I didn't deserve to work or to breathe unless I obeyed. But I'm done obeying." The judge's words that day felt like a wave washing away months of pain. "Ethan Walker and Deborah Walker," he said sternly, "you are both found guilty of financial coercion, domestic assault, and emotional abuse. You will pay a restitution fine of $50,000 and face 6 months of mandatory counseling and probation." Ethan's head hung low, Deborah covered her face, her arrogance gone. The gavel struck, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like justice still existed in this world. Lily gripped my hand, tears welling in her eyes, but this time they weren't from sorrow, they were from relief. As we stepped out of the courthouse, I looked up at the gray sky turning blue and whispered a silent thank you. My daughter was free. Not just from them, but from the guilt, the fear, the pain. She was free to start over. And for a mother, that freedom was everything. Months passed after the trial, and our lives began to find rhythm again. The house that once echoed with loneliness now felt alive with laughter and quiet peace. Lily had started working again, not at her old firm, but at a women's shelter downtown. She said she wanted to help others escape the kind of prison she once lived in. Watching her walk out every morning, head held high, filled me with a pride I can't put into words. Sometimes, she'd come home late, exhausted but smiling, telling me stories of women she had helped, women who were learning to stand again. "I see pieces of myself in them, Mom," she once told me, her eyes soft but steady. "But I also see what I've become, stronger." Those words alone made every sleepless night worth it. I began volunteering there too, organizing donations, helping with meals, listening to stories of broken hearts healing slowly. Each woman who walked through those doors reminded me that strength doesn't mean not breaking, it means rising after you do. Lily and I became each other's quiet courage. She was healing, and so was I. One evening, we went to the park near our house, the same park where I used to take her as a child. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, and the wind carried a calm that felt almost sacred. We sat together on a wooden bench, watching children play in the distance. Lily leaned her head on my shoulder and said softly, "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. For not listening, for walking away, for making you worry." I smiled and held her hand. "You don't need to apologize, sweetheart. Life teaches in its own ways. What matters is that you came back." She wiped a tear from her cheek and whispered, "You saved me." I looked at her, my daughter, my heart, my proof that love endures even after the world tries to crush it, and I said quietly, "No, Lily. You saved yourself. I only reminded you that you could." The sun sank lower, the air grew still, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. I turned to her, my voice low but sure. "A mother's warning is never a curse, sweetheart. It's love that arrives before the storm. I only wish every daughter could see that before it's too late." As the last light faded from the sky, Lily smiled, not the fragile smile she used to wear, but one full of strength, forgiveness, and freedom. And in that moment I realized, our story, born from pain, had finally found its peace. When I look back now, I realize how close I came to losing my daughter, not just to a cruel man, but to her own silence. If my story touched your heart, then don't forget to subscribe to my channel so more mothers and daughters can hear stories like ours. Stories of pain, strength, and survival. Tell me in the comments, if you were in my place, would you forgive the man who hurt your child, or would you let the law speak for you?